We can now move to looking at team change. We have looked at individual level change. Now let's look at teams. What's a team? A team shares a common purpose, is generally tighter and clearer about what it is and what its reason is in comparison to, let's say, a group. So we can differentiate between a group and a team in this manner. A team's members, they know exactly who is involved, who all are involved, what their goal is, what kind of time frame are they looking at for whatever it is that they have been asked to do. And of course, we must grant that a lot of what I'm saying now about a team exists in theory. In practice, we know that we form teams, but not all of us have the same understanding of what our purpose is. Not all of us understand what the goal is. Not all of us interpret our purpose along the same lines. I would like to describe an experiment that really is quite revealing about team behavior, and this is very important for understanding change management. I'm quoting from Rolf Stacey and his book on strategic management and organizational dynamics from 1993. This describes what happens when a group is brought together to study the experience of being in a group without any further task or without a clearly appointed leader. So here are some members who have been brought together, but there is no clear leader, and the purpose for forming this group or team, to be more precise, is not clearly spelled out. There is also a consultant who is part of this setting, but he offers his views, but otherwise takes no conscious part in the activity of the group. In this sort of setting, when there are no clear goals, or at least there are goals but they are not clearly understood, there is no clear leadership, what do you think happens? Think about it. In this experiment and experiments which have been conducted along similar lines, what happened was that there was a high level of anxiety among the participants. And this anxiety manifested itself in many kinds of behavior, strange behavior. The group discussions become very aggressive. The participants often become incredibly rude when there is no need to be rude. There have even been attempts to replace the non-performing or non-functioning consultant without success most of the time, because the group cannot agree on many things. But what also happens, two things happen, and I think these are very important for understanding the change process. One is that this group, they start picking on individual, usually some highly individualistic or minority member of the group, and they start treating this individual as some kind of a scapegoat. So they keep picking on one weak individual, or they render this individual weak through their collective action. The second thing which happens, which was seen, is the group, the members greatly fear exclusion. They don't want to be excluded out, they don't want to be singled out, they don't want to be the scapegoat. Therefore, many of them show strong tendencies to conform to rapidly established group norms, start suppressing their individual differences. The one thing that they generally don't do or they don't do too well is to examine their own behavior, the behavior they are indulging in. They don't do they don't examine the task that they have been given very well, even though the task is not very well defined. They don't discuss too much on what this task is, but everything else they end up doing. Very important. So if I am going to implement an e-government solution, I can expect various teams to behave in this particular manner. So unless there is a strong leadership, unless the purpose behind the whole change exercise is very clearly defined, clearly communicated, clearly understood by all the team members, then I can expect that various teams will behave in this particular manner. We know that teams are very important for accomplishing large or complex tasks. We need them to work to share ideas, we need them to align themselves with one another, and then there are significant benefits to be had from teams, and of course there are significant downsides to negative team behavior also. So team can become effective, an arrangement of individuals into teams can become very effective if we are able to address 5 elements: explaining the team mission, the planning, the goal setting, the role, the team roles, the operating processes for the team to follow, guidelines, rules on interpersonal relationships, and inter-team relations. So these are 5 key elements, key factors that we need to work on when implementing a change program. Just to recap, there are several pitfalls that need to be addressed when working with team. One is the dependency. As we have just seen in this example, in any team formation, the first thing people look for is for someone to tell them what to do. So there is a dependency. This is a perfectly natural phenomenon, given that many people will want to get on with the task, and many will believe that someone else knows what the task is and how it should be done, because this is generally the case. So especially in an unfamiliar environment, people become dependent. So the leader is expected to look after, protect and sustain the members of the group, to make them feel good and not to be burdened with all kinds of negative reactions that we just discussed. The second pitfall is that we need to factor in is moving through conflict. Fight or flight. A team tends to believe that either some force or some team or some members must be attacked or be fled from, and they look to the leader to devise appropriate action. What happens in many situations is teams, instead of organizing themselves in the best manner to accomplish their goal, they spend most of their time worrying about rumors about organization change, and this provides a sense of togetherness while also serving to avoid facing the difficulties of the work itself. Such a group may alternatively spend its time protesting angrily without actually planning any specific action. The threat may not actually come from an external force, but it may be a projection from the team. Extremely important. I would like to again give an example from a Harvard publication called the Nut Island experience. Those of you who are interested can, a lot of details are available about this Nut Island behavior in the public domain. But what I would like to just stress in this brief session is that here was a team which was exceptionally good. They had the knowledge, they had the leadership, they had the cohesiveness, they had everything positive about them. They were so successful that they cut themselves off from the main organization because they were self-reliant. They could manage all kinds of problems that they faced. What happened over a period of time was this success of this wonderful team, what it caused was to look at rest of the organization as kind of outsiders. So it was this team versus everyone else when there was no reason for such behavior. This happens in many e-government implementations which fail. There are teams which they do so well in their manual processes, through their manual records, through their strong leadership, that they feel that this new initiative is not required. I'm doing quite well. Why do I need a new system? So sometimes successful teams which do well can also be a problem, just as teams which don't gel too well can be a problem. Nut Island example. Think about it. Suppose you are one of the 5 senior officials asked to meet and discuss a new e-government proposal. Currently the services are provided through pen and paper, registers, record books. You are convinced that e-government solutions, ICT in its modern incarnation, is a better way of serving the citizens. You and rest of the 4 members of the group don't know each other very well. There is no leader. You've just been asked to meet and discuss. How will you lead the team towards a new way of working together? What obstacles do you foresee or predict, and how will you deal with them? This is an exercise for you. Think about it. One of the things that we must acknowledge from a change management perspective is a lot of work has been done on understanding individual behavior, team behavior, and so on, but very little has been done on how these impact organizational behavior. What we would like to do next is to take up the topic of organizational change. We have already looked at individuals, we have looked at teams. So we can start focusing on organization change. We have already acknowledged that organization change depends on individual change, it depends on team change, it also depends on its own approach, its own model that is adopted by the change agents. What is an organization? What is your view of organizations? Some view organizations as well-oiled, well-functioning, well-structured machines. This is a metaphor for organization. So there are very clear job description, there are clear lines of, there are clear hierarchies. What else? Others don't look at organizations as machines, but they look at organizations as political systems. A seething web of political intrigue, where coalitions are formed, power rules are played out, there are hidden agendas, opposing factions, political maneuvering. So this is another metaphor for organization, political metaphor. It's useful to look at an early work done by Gareth Morgan on organization as a metaphor, different kinds of metaphor. It's a wonderful work from Gareth Morgan. We don't have to look at all of them, but 4 of them seem very appropriate from an e-government perspective. These 4 are the ones we see more often being used by managers, by writers, by consultants, and therefore they appear to us as being useful in our understanding of organization change. What are these 4 metaphors? Organization as machine, organizations as political systems, organizations as organisms, and the 4th one is organizations as a kind of flux and transformation. What do each of these stand for? Each of these metaphors? The mechanistic view leads managers to design and run the organization as if it were a machine. This approach works fine, no problem, when the situation is stable. But when the need for significant change arises, a mechanistic view of organization will be seen as employees as a major overhaul, because I am now going to start a major change. I am going to implement an e-government system which is going to disrupt the entire organization. So from a mechanical view, the employees are going to feel that there is going to be a highly disruptive work environment, and therefore there will certainly be a lot of resistance to change. So any approach to viewing organization as machine translates into a lot of hard work when we want to implement e-government solutions. It will require strong management action, inspirational vision, and control from top down. When we see organization as political systems, we are drawing clear parallel between how organizations are run and systems of political rule. We can start referring to organizations as democracies, autocracy, anarchy, and so on. So here we start describing the power structure employed in the organization. In the metaphor of organizational life, organizations are seen as a set of interrelated subsystems designed to balance the requirements of the internal and the external environment, balance the requirement of the organization goals with the goals and aspirations of individuals. This approach implies that when designing or looking at change, we should always keep the environment in mind. Emphasis is placed on scanning the environment and developing healthy adaptation to the outside world. Individuals, group, organization health are all essential ingredients of this metaphor. So this is, compared to the mechanistic and political view, this is a much more positive view of organization. The assumption is that if the social needs of the individuals and groups in the organizations are met, and the organization is well designed to meet the needs of the environment, then there is good likelihood of healthy adaptation to the new change. So this seems to be a good approach to looking at organization. The final metaphor involves viewing organization as flux. What this does, as the term flux itself indicates, we are now looking at organization as complexity, as chaos, as paradox. Compared to the previous metaphor, in this particular metaphor of viewing organization as flux, the organization is part of the environment rather than distinct from it. So instead of looking at organization as separate from environment, we believe that changes in organization bring about change in the environment, changes in the environment change the organization. So it becomes extremely complex to understand how the organization really functions. As with most approaches to change management, we don't have to be either or. We can look at all the positive aspects from individual behavior, team behavior, organizational behavior, from various metaphors, come out with a clear understanding of where we stand from our cognitive perspective, where the organization stands, and then come out with a plan for leading the change. So these metaphors have implication for leadership.